Hey, welcome everyone. I'm Barry Cates with the Loudoun County Fellowship of Christian Athletes. Welcome everybody to our show. We're a local 501c3 organization. We support sports. We're looking to develop character through sports, and we want to serve all of the sports community, including coaches, athletes, parents, fans. Needless to say, we're passionate about sports, and we want to make this show as positive as we can to see what we can get the most valuable experience for all of those groups of people. And our main concern is just to go through the coaches, knowing that you guys are the ones that have that big influence. Again, I'm Barry Cates. I serve on field staff here. With me today, I have Matt Diner. He's our area director.
Yeah, thanks, Barry. We're excited to be here. I've played sports all growing up. It's been a huge part of my life. I love being part of FCA because I get to be around coaches and athletes every day. I grew up in high school, played football, basketball, and baseball. So there was never a season where I was not doing something and out playing sports, and went on to play football in college and then joined the performance training industry. So it's been one of those things where I've loved being a part of just hearing coaches and how the kind of impact that they have and the relationship they have with athletes and getting to see them grow. So what we get to do with FCA and what we're doing with the show, just being able to have these conversations and encourage coaches is exciting. And also with me is Noelle.
That's right. I'm Noelle Blankenship, and I'm an area representative for Fellowship of Christian Athletes. My sports background, I guess, I love volleyball. I did gymnastics growing up. That was super fun. And I have some really strong memories from doing gymnastics. Never would have thought.
It's awesome.
Yeah.
It's fantastic. Well, it sounds like all of us, with everything that we've been about, what we're really about now is coaches. We know that there's a famous quote out there that says one coach will impact more people in one season than the average person does in a lifetime. So we understand the impact that coaches have. We also understand the culture of sports has changed since the days that we played. I think that's probably safe to say. You guys have probably played a little bit more recently than I have, but
just a few years.
Yeah, probably a few. But with that changing culture, we still understand the value that sports bring in developing character to our young people. We also understand that as things get more competitive, maybe the culture of sports the changes that have come. Maybe not all of them have been positive. Maybe there's been some things that we can look at and say, hey, we can do this a little bit better. And I think that's going to be the point of what we're here to do, is just to help those coaches get to a point of where they do things better, and everyone involved, whether it be parents or coaches, athletes, fans, everyone gets a more positive experience from what sports has to offer. One of the ways that we've seen this sort of change in culture come, competition has certainly raised to newer levels at earlier stages of life. Matt, what's one of the things that has kind of come out of what's been going on with this shift in culture?
Yeah, I think that you're seeing that it's so competitive at an early age where every game has much more meaning. You're not having time to develop and just play. Because we all have memories of just being able to go out in the backyard and just have fun with sports, and that's really what it's all about. But it gets so competitive, and the culture of sports is so much about winning and losing and having your identity in sports that that's something that we're going to look at for our first topic today and just talk about what is that doing to the game, and how as a coach can we combat that? How can we have a strategy, have a plan to make sure that these kids enjoy sports and get the most out of it? Because not only are they going to develop, but they're going to have fun doing it, and that's the whole point, right?
I think that's definitely a point.
Yeah, I mean, that's what's important. I mean, what are your strongest memories of when you had fun, right? Or when you last played basketball because it was fun? Maybe.
No,
maybe. Or
that's
because it was competitive.
When we started talking about this, I mean, we would go out, and I started thinking back to just growing up, and sometimes it was basketball, sometimes it was hockey, sometimes we'd play. You remember pickle? Or just two bases. Like we could play.
We could play.
Oh, it's a baseball game, just two bases, and you're just running back and forth trying not to get tagged. We'd play that for 2 hours at a time. So. It's kind of looking back. I don't know how I played that for that long, but yeah, just having fun playing sports. I think that's the experience you don't see as much of. You see kids coming out of games and just worried if they made mistakes, not wondering how their parents are going to react. So it kills me to see that. and that's really what we're going to dive into a little bit today.
So with this culture that has shifted, I think there is one specific area that we can look that we've seen that we think is a really negative aspect. It sounds like not as many kids are playing sports into the later stages of life. Noelle, do you know anything? What do you have to offer on?
Do I know anything?
on that phenomenon
I'm
that's
not
occurring
sure.
at this point?
Yeah, I'll let you talk about that. I don't really know.
Well, fortunately, it's not up to us to necessarily know that. We have a video that we want to introduce.
Yes.
That is going to explain sort of the phenomena that is occurring that we think is one of the negative aspects of the sports culture today. So check out this video.
Awesome.
We can't stay where we are anymore in the arena of sport. First of all, just because kids aren't the same as they were when I came through sport. We have a phenomenon now called 12-year-old burnout. When I came through 12-year-old, I was just getting started. And because I was getting started, there was so much margin in my life. Dr. Richard Swenson defines margin as the space between my load and my limits. And when I came into sport, I had so much space between my load and my limits, I could tolerate a bad coach. Shouldn't have been a bad coach, but I could tolerate it. Kids come into your programs today with so little margin in their emotional, relational, even spiritual lives that if you don't care for their hearts, they will quit on you. But it's not their fault. That's why we tell coaches it's now essential to learn how to coach the heart of the player, not just the skills and strategy of the game. Because if kids enter into an environment where they're cared for, they're not about to leave that. That's life-giving, and sport needs to be life-giving, not life-draining.
So wow, there's a lot in that video. Just a little over a minute video, and I feel like there's a lot to unpack with it of kids really burning out of sports by the age of 12, and when most of us are kind of even starting. So Barry, when did you start playing sports, whether organized or just kind of playing? What did that look like for you?
Yeah, I would say that organized sports, right around 7, 8 years old, coming together in a league, but not with defined teams. So you would come together. They would split us up into different groups each week. We didn't keep standings. There was a score in the game, so you were learning how to compete. You were learning what the rules are and the fundamentals of how to succeed at the actual game, but with no extra weight added to competition standings. Hard to define success that way other than you getting better. The real success was you becoming a better player. Probably 8, 9 years old when we started getting into divided teams with league standings and playoffs and ways to progress toward a championship. And I think that experience was fantastic as well. But there is a real joy that comes to my heart when I think about that time of just going to play and meeting new people and having fun and not worrying about whether or not, we came in first, second, third, or whatever. And we loved winning. At the end of that day, you celebrated when you won and you felt bad when you lost. But you just knew that, man, we're going back next week and we'll play again. Those were the ways that it went at that young of an age. I appreciate that time.
And that's what makes it fun, right? I was a big stats guy growing up, and I love just looking at the standings for the teams that I followed in college and pro. So I'm a big Michigan and Detroit fan, so I was that guy always looking at the standings and checking if we were still in first place. Winning was just I always wanted to see how my team was doing, but when I was playing, I don't remember really checking that. Like you said, I knew when I won, I was happy, loved being around my teammates, and just being able to celebrate a win. You kind of sulk at a loss, but it didn't affect you going into the next game. You're just looking forward to the next time I got to play versus how I looked at professional and college sports. It was just, that's all I knew was I kind of looked at it that way, but I don't think it really seeped into how we viewed youth sports, Noelle, was it same for you?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think I was first exposed to competitive sports when I did gymnastics, and that's probably why I have so many memories of it. I think I was like 10 or 11. I did level 5, which is pretty
Wow.
low, but
It
I
sounds
enjoyed
good.
it.
Wait, is it supposed to go
We're not
higher or
familiar.
I'm not
lower?
telling you.
So is 5 good or bad?
No, I did 5, and it's where you all have the same floor routine, so it's compulsory. You all learn the same thing, and whoever does the best at that. When you're level 6, 7, 8, you're gonna make up your own floor routines. So that's
Yikes.
that's kind of the fun of it. But yeah, I think that was my first exposure. Besides growing up playing volleyball with my dad, who's a coach in the house.
When did you start volleyball?
I think I was 4. You know, just
Yikes.
everything. Yeah.
So as we moved into those times, you talked about your dad being a coach. My dad was a coach. I was coached by my dad.
I didn't know that.
He was
Football?
baseball at that
Baseball,
time. My dad
okay.
was more of a baseball guy.
Yeah.
It's probably been where I've had my most valuable experiences through playing football and basketball were great too, and I had some great coaches there as well. But coming from a dad who was a coach on the baseball field, knowing that that's how I was developed and those fundamentals that were ingrained in me, I'm thankful that my dad was as loving as a coach as he was. We were competitive, we won, but we also, I think every child who played for him knew how much he cared about them. And that was really a valuable experience for us, especially, and he only coached me up until the time of 12 years old. But I'm thankful that I had that so that I could know the difference between what one of those positive coaches was later on and maybe some of the other coaches that I had in other sports who weren't like that. I was able to deal with that because I knew that I was already built up enough in my identity, that I could tolerate, like the video says, I could tolerate a bad coach at that point.
Yeah.
I had some margin.
That's good.
How did you have any effects of that?
My dad coached me too, so I was in the same boat. And he was super intense, and I think there's this perception that you can't be an intense coach and still love your players and be involved, because we used to joke that my dad was the Bobby Knight of youth basketball coaches. I mean, he was just in your face, intense, but he knew everybody's name. He knew them outside of sports. He cared about everybody. And you just knew that after the game, he wasn't coming down on you. He was always teaching and coaching, but he was super intense. So it's kind of a both and versus thinking that, hey, you can't be a coach that cares about your athletes without, having that mentality of, hey, I can't be too intense. So I definitely had coaches that have been in all spectrums, but playing under my dad, since we're talking about being coached by your parents, I had a great experience with it, but I would say you kind of had to know him if you just watched one game, you'd be like, man, that guy was over the top
That's
intense.
really interesting.
But once you got to know him, I mean, you just saw what it was really like being a part of his program.
I wonder if athletes who were not his son have the same view of him.
I don't know.
No,
I would think so,
No,
but
I know.
he was probably harder on me than anybody else. But
Yeah.
But I still think I saw it from him.
Yeah. So would you say he was a life-giving coach, not life-draining? Back to the video.
I would.
Yeah.
And that's I've seen both types of coaches.
Excuse me.
When you look at life-giving, my first 2 years of high school, I had life-giving coaches that were just mentors that I still talk to today. Coach Miller has been the most impactful coach in my life, and somebody I still text with every now and then.
Wow.
And I went to a small school in Ohio. Haven't seen him in a long time, but just to still interact because he taught me so many things. But you just knew that he cared about you. And then I've been on the other end of the spectrum where I had a high school coach my junior year in basketball that really I always thought basketball would be the sport that I played beyond high school, and I ended up playing football at the next level. But basketball it stopped being fun for me because our coach was just too focused on doing things his way and not developing as a player. So I felt that I didn't really improve because I was scared of making mistakes and having to follow that system rather than, hey, develop your game. I never just felt encouraged in that. And it really, it brought up to even this day, I kind of have a mental block about, certain things in basketball and certain shots where I just know that it took the fun out of it for me. So I'm sure we all have certain coaches that have been on each end.
I would say so. I think it's interesting when you bring up that type of topic the feelings that you brought up. And if we're talking about what the video mentioned was load versus limit, and the margin in between needs to be a certain level. There needs to be margin in between there for an athlete to feel successful, for him to still receive joy. And when we take away that margin, it sounds like your margin was taken away from both ends, from the limit being lowered because of the feelings that you had, and yet the load being increased because of the fact that if you weren't successful, you know, there was real detriment, there was real punishment.
Pressure, right?
Yeah,
Pressure and stress, that raises a load. I think the whole concept of load or limit, you got to kind of define it beyond just the physical. It's the mental and emotional part of sports that that can increase too. It's not just saying, hey, you practice more, your load is increased. No, it's stress, it's pressure, it's everything that competition brings, and we love it because we're competitive, and that's what sports is about. But when that becomes the only thing, or that becomes your identity, I think is where that load goes to an unhealthy level.
So do we have any stats on athletes quitting sports at a young age? Do we know that off the top of our heads?
I bet Barry does. He's a numbers guy. He knows.
Come on, Barry.
The statistics will show, studies will show that in today's culture, 70% of athletes will stop playing. The studies are sure, and I think that they've done them over a large enough sample and a long enough term of time to say that, yes, it's 70%. That's 7 out of 10. Now in baseball, you know, 7 out of 10 failure rate, you can live with that. As a coach, if 7 out of 10 of your players are not returning the next year, I think there's something that needs to be fixed. Mm-hmm. My big question when I received that stat, and I said, okay, if the load and the limit being the margin being or the margin just being removed, and it's causing kids to quit, my first thought was, well, then why do the other 30% even stay? I mean, if sports is a life draining experience, then why would we not have them all quit? I mean, we should just shut down the whole sports industry. The problem with that is that sports in and of themselves are character building. They're a positive experience when done right, and that there is way too much to be gained if we just say, let's stop doing it. We're not here to stop doing it. What we're here to do is say, let's do it better. Yeah. And especially at the 12-year-old and 13-year-old range, that we're saying there is too much to be lost by doing it wrong and letting these 7 out of 10 kids fall through the character building crack of ending sports. And so I guess it just leaves me in a position of saying, how are we going to do this better? Like, as a coach, I have a real responsibility to society and, you know, to the people around me, to my community, to the parents, and especially to the athletes, that if I'm not helping them become the best people they can be, I'm a detriment in their life. And I don't want to go to bed at night thinking I'm a detriment in someone's life. I certainly hope that any experience that people have with me, they can walk away and go, I'm glad I spent time with him. You know, I don't know that that's what we're getting all the time through our sports experience.
Well, and I think it'd be interesting to know if the stats, because you're never going to get 100%. There are certain kids that go through middle school sports and realize sports just aren't for me, or this sport's not for me. So the rate of youth athletes quitting, how much is character and how much is just learning that? But what breaks your heart is just that how many kids do you see playing pickup sports? And you're like, hey, do you play for your school? Like, no, I'm not good enough, or I just, you know, it's not my thing. And they'll come up with a bunch of reasons, but a lot of it's, were they encouraged? Did they feel that life-giving part of sports versus it became something I had to do, not something I got to do?
Well, it's the high expectations too. I mean, I think a lot of kids just don't want to perform because they don't want to fail.
Well, especially in this area, in Northern Virginia, it's not just sports; it's everything. We're competitive.
Scary.
You have to succeed, and that's really the tension is tough, and we love to succeed, and I don't think it's a bad thing to want to do well, and I think that's what we're kind of getting at here is just what makes that load too heavy. It's when you put that much emphasis and that much weight on the load versus or on the performance versus, hey, this is not who you are. This doesn't define you. That's not the reason we're playing. hey, if you play your best, yeah, you're going to win. You're going to be successful. Not you didn't have success because of the scoreboard. And it's an interesting thing to note, because when we're talking about this, it's not some, in theory, this is stuff we're dealing with as coaches every day on making sure that we're setting up that environment. And we want to make this as practical as possible. I think it's a goal of us talking the show is how can we make practical advice and tips and encouragement? Because when you're saying, hey, this doesn't happen to my kids, to some level it is in every coaching atmosphere we're in.
I agree. I think in the end, what the conclusion you come to is that we're not just developing athletes to be great athletes, to be successful in the realm of athletics, but we want them to be fully developed human beings, right? People who are going to be positive members of our society. That's what we're here to do. It sounds like there is more to a person than just who they are, athletically.
Yeah,
right?
performance-wise.
Performance.
I sure hope so.
I think what we're trying to do, one of the things that we're going to do over the course of all of our time spent through all of our efforts, we use a program called 3-dimensional coaching, where we're trying to reach every aspect of a person's life. Again, I'm going to go back to stats, right? I'm a stats guy.
Okay, what you going to say?
Our stats show that 80% of coaches coach in the first dimension only.
Oh, yes.
First dimension is those measurable things, strength, speed, power, all of those things that can be measured. First dimension. And if you're a coach, we need you coaching well in the first dimension.
So right? You have to, right? You can't be a coach and not know the sport.
I
Can you?
100%.
No,
I don't think that there's any joy to play for a coach who's not able to coach you in the first dimension.
So like fundamentals of the sport would be first dimension.
Right.
Okay.
I don't know of anyone that gets joy from going out and losing every game by 25 or 50 points or whatever it is. So first dimension is important. Second dimension, statistically speaking, another 15% of coaches coach in the second dimension. And the second dimension is the emotional side of things, right? It's motivation, it's team cohesion, all those things, confidence that add up to the emotional side of the player that they're able to, again, once you're coaching in the second dimension, you're taking them to a higher level of potential to where they can be a better player, but not just a better player, a better person. If we're developing those skills, those emotional skills as athletes, they'll carry over into the rest of the aspects of your life to be a more positive person there.
Okay.
Again, statistically speaking, that's 80 and 15. We're at 95%. I'm not a math whiz. I think that leaves about
yes, he is.
I think that leaves about 5% of our coaches that actually reach the third dimension. What do you think makes up the third dimension?
It's the heart. Coaching the heart.
Ding, 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 ding.
What does that look like? How do we coach the heart?
How do we coach the heart? And that's the whole thing, right? Of what you're talking about. That's why sports psychology is so popular now. Of hey, we have to focus on the mental edge, and we have to be able to get these athletes thinking about their confidence and what motivates them, this intrinsic motivation, not just extrinsic and things outside. But when you're talking about coaching the heart, you're talking about significance and value. And it goes way beyond just, I'm going to push the right buttons to try to get them to win this game. Right, you're dealing with character of an athlete, and I forget who said it, but when you ask a coach, hey, did you have a great season? Well, I won't know for 20 years.
That's John Wooden.
John Wooden. You think I would know that?
Wow.
But it's just when you think about it, of are you instilling values in an athlete's life that go beyond what happens on the court or on the field, but go throughout their life. And that's coaching the heart. And the crazy thing is, if you coach the heart, you're going to get more out of them in every other dimension. They're going to play harder. I'm sure as we think back to our favorite coaches, who did you give the best effort for? Who did
coach you liked? Yeah.
The coach that cared
about
you.
The coach that loved me, right?
Yeah.
Whether I liked him or not, if I knew he loved me, I'll run through a wall for him. I mean, that's the plain and simple truth of it.
And that you have to genuinely love your players. I know it's a hard concept to talk about we can kind of fake it. I'm going to show an interest. I'm going to ask some questions. But there's a difference between I'm going to make sure I talk to this kid versus I love my players. And it goes to your why of coaching. Why do you do what you do? What kind of impact do you want to have? Because if you truly coach for the right reasons, it's going to show through in just how you interact. And it doesn't look forced. It's naturally, hey, I love you as my team, as my players, because I care about you.
This is so deep.
I just went there.
I want to hit you with the deepest part of it is that
oh my goodness,
the coach is the one who holds that platform.
Okay, why?
There was a time in society when it wasn't so much the coach. Again, we talked about there being more margin and how we could tolerate a bad coach.
Okay.
With no margin in today's society, the coach is the place where every athlete that's involved in sports turns to find their significance. And if they get it from the coach, then their whole life falls in order. And that's a lot to put on a coach.
Yeah, it is.
To say that you're the guy that gives that. Mm-hmm. Welcome to coaching.
Or girl.
Or girl, right. or
female coaches.
Or ladies, right?
Well.
My deepest apologies to all
Thank you.
female coaches in our audience. So I think that's the big thing that we want to get across is that, number one, coaches are the most important to us because of this platform that they have.
Yes.
And number two,
influence.
we just want them to be aware of the influence that they have. I don't know that every coach knows that, but if we can get that across, then I think we start to cover some of that loss of the value of sports of those 7 out of 10 that are dropping out between now and then. We're going to show you a little video on what we think the role of a coach is. Let's take a look at that.
Awesome.
Coach's job. Can we take this group that we've been given to a level that they cannot get to by themselves? That's really what a coach's job is. That's what we're going to look at today. I put this up because he was a mentor to me. Coach Bowden has since retired, has been out of the game for a little bit, and he's now the winningest coach in NCAA history. But let me tell you, how he coached was so much greater than just the game itself. In fact, I will tell you this. He's still a dear friend and a dear mentor. There are football coaches in this audience right now that know more football than Bobby Bowden. But Bobby Bowden had something that went much deeper. His ability to connect with kids, even at his age. I'll never forget when he brought me into his office as a very first-year graduate assistant, and he brought me into his office, closed the door, and here's what I was told. If Coach Bowden closes the door, that ain't a good thing. You're about ready to get the pink slip, because he never closed his door. Closed the door, brought me up, set me knee to knee, came from around his desk and said, Jeff, we got these kids for 3, 4, 5 years. When they leave here, they got to be different. Now, we're going to be judged by that scoreboard out there, but they got to be different. We got to coach them in a way that makes them better in what they do. And boy, did kids connect and players connect. And listen, it wasn't always great at Florida State. It wasn't like they always won. In fact, when he went there, the old saying was, don't ever buy a ticket on the 40-yard line. Buy a ticket on the 10-yard line and just slide to the 40. That's how bad the program was at the time. He was able to start connecting.
So now that we know the role of a coach, we've got a lot of information. It's great for us to just sit around and talk about it, and I could talk with you guys forever about this. But we wanted to give another perspective from a local high school coach. So we're going to just have some time with softball coach over at Riverside High School, Mr. Kevin Bednowski.
Mm-hmm.
Riverside Softball Clubhouse over at Riverside High School. I'm here with head varsity softball coach Kevin Bednowski. Kevin, tell us a little bit about who you are, what you do, and how you got here.
Sure. Well, first, thanks a lot for having me. This is a very important conversation that we're going to have, right? So this is my first year as the head varsity softball coach, not just of the varsity team, but of the overall program. I'm very programmatic focused. So what we're going to do is build a culture together of positivity with all these girls in this program, and we're going to hopefully, make it last for quite some time.
Amen. Hitting the third dimension, I know that's dear to your heart. It's exactly what we're about as well. After our conversations, we had a good conversation yesterday. This will just be kind of a continuation of that. One of the things that we saw in our video, the 12-year-old burnout, and how much a role a coach can play in avoiding that and making that better for your athletes so that they will want to continue to keep playing. In your experiences, what are some of the things that you've seen as big influencers on that load and limit that we talked about in the video?
Yeah, there's so many external pressures that a 12-year-old or even 15, 16, 17-year-old teenage girl or any teenage athlete can handle. And those pressures, those external pressures, come from a lot of different places. It comes from adults. It comes from their peers. It comes from expectations. It comes from her parents. It comes from coaches, good and bad. So what we as positive adult role models and positive coaches need to do to reduce that pressure on kids is create authentic, genuine relationships with them that have nothing to do with their athletic prowess. And if we can do that, if we can grow personal relationships with kids, get to that third dimension, get to the point where it's not about your productivity on the field, on the court. That's not what we're getting at. If it's about, I want what's best for you as a human being. If we can reach those kids, we can reduce some of that pressure. Now we're starting to expand what their limits will allow. And if we can do that, we're going to put them in the best position to be successful, both on and off the field.
I think that's a big part of what we're talking about here, because as coaches, we want you to be successful, right? We think on the field performance is an important aspect of what you're doing, right? No one has fun losing every game.
Right.
We want to make sure that the on the field performance is at its optimum potential. I think that's what we've said before, is that this is all about reaching max potential for our athletes. And so what you're doing doesn't just affect off the field, it also affects on the field.
I'm a proponent, though, of that when you have to get to that productivity on the field in reverse, where you're working with kids off the field to develop trust, to develop a relationship, to develop something deeper than, again, I'll use softball as the example. Hey, you're going to go out there and go 2 for 3 today. It's not about going 2 for 3. It's did I as a coach and we as a coaching staff put you in a position to be successful? And if I have the relationship with you off the field, if I'm doing things with you that develop your character, if I'm doing things to help you understand yourself better, I am going to draw out your max potential back on the field. And that's just the basis and the foundation of the culture that I bring to the table and that we're going to build here at Riverside.
I think that's amazing that we would say that that's the extenuating result, but not the goal. So the goal is the relationship.
Yeah, don't get me wrong. We want to compete every single time we take the field, right? There's no doubt that that winning is fun, because losing is not necessarily fun.
Right.
But there's a lot of gray area there. Sometimes you win and it's not really. It might have been fun on the scoreboard, but we don't want to use the scoreboard as the only basis and foundation to determine our level of success. Because you can win pretty ugly, and you can lose by playing pretty well. Baseball, softball, diamond sports, all sports, some things, many things are out of your control. So if you compete really hard, you give max effort, just like you would do in the classroom, right? You work really hard, you study really hard, that teacher pours into you in the classroom and out of the classroom, and you wind up with an 89 instead of a 90, and you get a B+ instead of an A-, that's okay. It's okay. I think one of the hardest things to teach young kids and young student athletes today is how to deal with less than optimal success. I won't say failure, because an 89 is certainly not failure in the classroom, or going 2 for 3 is not failure on the field. But how do we deal with less than optimal success with the expectations that they place on themselves, or that other outward pressure that is being placed on them by other folks?
Yeah, I'm 100% behind you. I agree with everything you're saying. it's easy for us to sit and talk about it. We sit and conceptually, we say that's exactly what we want to do. I think one of the challenges that many coaches face is, how do I do that? One of the things we come from is a background of you and I playing back in the, I won't say what decade, but a long time ago, and you know, this wasn't necessarily so emphasized, wasn't even as important then because we got fulfillment from other places. So in today's society, with this being way more important, how do I put rubber to the road and tangibly make that happen?
Sure. When you and I were kids back in the right, probably the adult male, the dad or someone or a coach, they'd sit there and using baseball for us, right? They just bang ground balls at you, or fire BP at you, and just hours and hours and hours and hours, and you
were on my team, apparently.
Right. you knew that they cared because they were present. Well, it takes a lot more than that today. And you have to build, culture was just, back sort of when we were kids, culture was about competing and winning and, am I going to go get ice cream afterwards? Right. And that was the culture, kind of, right? Or is there the pizza party, right? That was kind of the culture when we were kids, and then you just did it all over again, from sport 1 to sport 2 to sport 3. So today we have to do much, much more. One, to catch youngsters' attention, because there are so many competing facets and competing things for their attention, right? There are studies out there that show that literally a teenage student today has a singular attention span for about 7 to 11 seconds, right, on any one given task at any one given time. So teachers in the classroom, coaches on the field, really have to work very hard in planning and being effective on the field. Now, we have to do the same thing off the field. So we have to provide opportunity to get their attention, to let them grow, and then understand them as human beings. Twice a week while we're in season, I take the girls over to Selden's Landing Elementary School, and we mentor and we read and we work with 2nd and 3rd and 4th graders on whatever their teacher whatever they need help on. But it gets them off the field. So what's it doing? It's showing them how to mentor. It's showing them how to give back. It's showing team camaraderie amongst that group. And then you should have saw the smile on all those kids' faces when we invited them here for a game at the end of the season, and they got to run out onto the field with their, with the player that was mentoring them, and just the pure joy. And just that connection, just that one singular connection, something like that, gives them reason to perform at their max potential. So you have to do things. You have to understand those kids, because it's different. It's just way different than when we were sort of doing the same thing they're doing today.
Yeah, I think that's exactly what we heard in the video when we heard that sports are supposed to be a life-giving experience, not life-draining. It sounds like the things that you're exposing them to are giving life more than draining life. Without that, sports really can be draining. But to have that experience brings new life into the whole program.
Yeah, everyone thinks sports is only about winning, losing, or statistics. Yeah, it's largely that, but it's about relationships. And relationships between coach-player, relationships within players, relationships that will last a lifetime. If you, as we were walking up the stairs, and we can probably get a shot of it maybe later, there's legacy in the high school sports, right? On the wall behind us over here, we've got where each of our seniors, as they graduate the program, are going to leave their handprint, their mark, with a quote, with a motivational quote about what their time here playing Riverside softball meant to them. And we look to fill that wall up. Obviously, we're a new school, but we look to fill that up with legacy and relationships and a long-lasting culture that these girls are giving back to each other and to the community.
I know there was a couple stories that you told me yesterday. Could you share a little bit about, and not to get too personal on anything, sure, but there was a few things that you shared that I thought were valuable.
Making connections with student athletes is not easy. Again, going back to the concept where there are all these pressures, especially on teenage girls right now, the way they look, the way they feel, the way they act, the way they sound, are they successful? All these things are putting pressures on them. And sometimes to claw back some of that exterior and really to get to know kids, know the way they learn, know the way they behave, understand, you know, how they're doing in the classroom, what are their pressures at home, can I possibly do something to assist them. You know, we have one girl who's just been through the ringer with injuries, you know, a couple of knee surgeries in the last couple of years, and you know, she'll call me. I don't know if the camera gets it, but we've got this beautiful hill behind us, and you know, she sent me a text sitting up on the top of the hill with a picture saying, "Coach, I'm just so sad." And to me, that singular text, although it were short, it says a lot about her. It says a lot about our relationship, one that she trusts, that she can open up to me, right? She can confide in me. You know, it's that same girl that when we were handing out uniforms last year and she was not quite back from her injury, she's like, "Hey coach, you know, I know can you make sure number 14 might be available?" I'm like, I got you, right? Again, that relationship, that connection where she feels she's vulnerable. And it's okay for a teenage girl to be vulnerable. And sometimes all those outward pressures that are coming on them don't allow them to sort of peel that back and allow that. You know, we have another girl who's just a fantastic kid, a great ball player, has been through some tough things in her life, and you know, single mom, works really hard, makes sure that she's involved in her children's lives, but just so busy couldn't get her to the DMV. And every 15-and-a-half-year-old girl, all they want to do is just start that driving process, right? They just want to get on it. And finally I was just like, look, you get all the papers signed, let's go. Monday morning, whatever it was, we're gonna hit it. We're gonna go. So we were maybe fifth in line over at the DMV, and you know, get it taken care of. But again, you have to. Neither of those sort of scenario stories, situations, have anything to do with what we're doing on the field. Now, what coaches don't generally grasp fully is that separation. And one, it takes time to build those relationships. Those don't happen overnight, number one. Just because I'm an adult authority doesn't give me the right to, you know, just say, hey, I'm, you know,
taking over your life.
I'm inserting myself in your life. So it takes time to develop that, build that respect, that trust. It's not just given, and it's not earned either. It's developed. It's grown over time. So I think that generally coaches struggle a little bit with that regard. They think, hey, I'm the authority figure. Respect is mine. Bang, bang, bang. You'll do what I tell you, et cetera, et cetera. I tend to believe that the more personal connections we make with those girls, this is the other part that they may need to develop further as well, is that the more connections, I guarantee you that either one of those young ladies, if I said, hey, we got to run through a wall today, they'd be first in line to run through a wall, right? Because they're on their max. They've expanded what they believe their max capabilities could be, largely because of the freeness and the openness of the culture that hopefully is being created.
Yeah, that's exactly everything that we've talked about. It's amazing. Just want to thank you for taking time out of your schedule to spend some time with us, and you know, really to clarify a lot of the things that we talk about, that sometimes it just takes a coach's voice to say, hey, this can really put feet to what we're talking about. We're thankful for everything that you do here. Wishing good luck to the Rams all season long. I know it's, you know, a long time till you get out there, it feels like it, but it'll be coming real soon. And just appreciate what you're doing here. Thankful for coaches like you, and you know, I know your heart. We've known each other a long time. I just appreciate who you are, and just really want to say thanks.
I really appreciate it. You know, it's a blessing to be able to give back to the community, to young women and young student athletes, and it's just it's a fantastic opportunity to be able to give back and compete. Right? It's still in your heart to compete, and you know, that's what we hope to do every time we step on the field and we compete off the field, and we we would just look to grow relationships with one another and really make that and culminate that here in the spring.
Good stuff.
Great.
Well, we look forward to having you on another episode soon.
Absolutely. Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Go Rams.
Yeah.
Now that we've established what the real role of a coach is, it sounds daunting. It can sound very just like a big burden on a coach. That should never be the case. We want this coaching experience to bring joy as well. And I think our biggest perspective is just simply coaches were created by God to coach. You were intended for this. It's what you were meant to do.
I like that.
And I do believe that with that platform, it should be a blessing more than a burden when we go to do the things that we should be doing.
Exactly. This should be something that we take that platform and we look forward to the opportunities that we have to lower that load and increase the limit. And the big thing we want to do through this whole series is give practical tips that we can take back to our teams. And I'm going to give 2 today, and we can kind of talk through our experience with them of what are some ways that we can implement this in practice to see those kind of results in a simple way. And the first one is called the spotlight drill. This is something you can do out of practice, right before, right after. It could be part of the end of practice. I've seen coaches use it right when they're done. They'll come together, and the whole point is you get one athlete from your team, and you pull them up in front of the room, and basically as a coach, you can set this up and say, if we're doing a spotlight drill on Barry, I want everybody on the team to tell me something about Barry. What does Barry bring to this team that adds value? And it can't have to do with the physical side of sports. It can't be Barry is really good at basketball. He can dunk better than anybody I've ever seen, which I know is true. Both on both counts, both true. It has to be something that, hey, he cares for people. He goes above and beyond to make sure that we're all feeling included. He always picks me up when I'm having a bad practice. And I think we're kind of looking at this saying, well, that's easy to do when you've known everybody. What if I have a new team that just got together? If you're a coach with a new team that's just forming, then start with the physical. Start with, let's just do putt-ups. Putt-ups is almost a version of the spotlight drill.
Matt, you're so good at this.
We're just talking about. I've done this before with teams. We did this for our volleyball team. Remember, we just went around the room and we talked about what do we do well.
Oh yeah.
Whether it's in volleyball.
Yeah.
You set the ball really well. You had a couple really good digs today. It could start with things like that, and then once you get to know each other, you get to know each other's personality traits and character. Then the conversations get a little deeper. And what you'll start finding is that kids light up when they're the spotlight because they're being poured into, but you'll also find that everybody else loves it because they're looking for things to encourage others. So the spotlight drill is one easy thing to implement in practice. It's going to show a huge benefit to the kids, but also the parents. Do it around the parents after a game. Let them hear it because I think it's important for them to see that you guys are a team, not just, hey, we come together and play this game for an hour. The second tip, and this is one that I love. It's super practical, but you're going to see benefits on the court or the field. Bring joy into conditioning. Bring joy into practice. and what I mean by that, I'm sure we've all been there where we've run lines. We've run straight gassers down and back.
I'm faster.
I'm faster. I know you'd probably beat all of us right now.
No joy in that.
Actually, I'm not that fast.
It's not fun. And the thing is, if the goal is to improve your conditioning, when you're dragging and you're not into it emotionally, you're going to give the least amount of effort possible, unless I have to do more punishment. It's basically you're going to do the bare minimum to meet that time requirement. If you start implementing games of tag, team building relays, ways to make conditioning fun, you'll not only find that they come away from practice saying, I can't wait to do that again, but do you remember the last time you played tag? Barry, maybe no.
It's been a long time.
Barry, when did
we
you
play
last
tag
play?
all the time.
Right.
When did you last play tag? Do you remember?
I would have to say the last time I played tag, it's probably at an FCA camp somewhere recently. As an adult,
we played tag a lot
Yeah,
this summer.
Yeah.
And when you play tag,
it's fun.
You're out of breath too.
Yeah.
So if you want to get in shape,
certainly
play a lot of tag, basically.
Tag is a good one.
But again, the whole purpose is you're going to get just as much benefit, but the kids are going to love it, right? I mean, that's the whole
for sure.
point.
Yeah.
You can't leave without laughing, without just having fun. and the athleticism that can be displayed, just to see guys, avoid and try and make tags, everything that they're doing. There's certainly skill building going on with absolutely no acknowledgement from them other than fun.
And the joy you get to play. It's the keyword play, PLAY, play. It's important.
Have you been able to play in practice, or what's an experience that you've had?
Thank you for asking me. That's so nice of you.
Anytime.
Yeah, I was just thinking back to college when I did the swim team. I'm not much of a swimmer. Not like Hannah Rogers, shout out to her, County. I'm sure she's much faster than me. But so I was on the college swim team before it was even like a D1 division. It was just club. And I just remember we had our coach. He rewarded us on Thursdays or every other Thursday, or if we did something good, just letting us play water polo. And like we just pretended we were polo players and just got to swim around. And I remember that. Like, and my memory is not that good, and I remember that from college.
That's awesome.
Just because it was play.
Water polo would
fun.
scare me. I can't swim very well, so if my feet can't hit the bottom,
so
I'm out.
I can guarantee you there was some cardio being done on that as well. Yeah.
But the principle is the coach instituted play into practice, and it really made a difference in how his athletes, like we had fun, we loved it, and we wanted to come back,
And that doesn't happen on accident. So that coach
Yeah,
knew that,
good.
and he knew it was going to get the best out of you. So I think being strategic, having a plan of how you're going to implement that is important.
Yeah, I think it is. It has to be intentional. It has to be done with the right perspective. I can certainly say as a coach, thinking I was doing it right, I was coaching middle school basketball. We played keep away in our practices, and when we first started, it was great. The kids loved it, and being the typical just pusher coach that I was, not coaching in the third dimension, but staying in the first dimension, we added push-ups to the team that couldn't either steal the ball or keep the ball long enough.
Okay.
Kind of ruined the whole play aspect. So I'll say that it can be done right, it can be done wrong, but always be intentional about saying it's just for fun. No scoreboard, no punishments, no rewards, no external rewards. I think that's one of the things that we've talked about is intrinsic rewards. They're just going to get the joy of beating their teammates, of having fun, and tag not getting it, keep away keeping the ball. Once that play comes in there, I think it just fulfills the purpose exactly what it's supposed to do. And that's a great tip. I don't think there's anything else better that we could give. Those two are starting points. We always want to make sure that you guys have tangible ways to be doing the things that we're instructing you how to do. And we'll keep doing that in the future. It's been a great day. Thank you, guys.
Thanks, Barry.
Yeah.
I love hanging
my
out.
It's been
pleasure.
fun. We could do this every day.
This is really cool.
I don't know if
And,
I can endure
just-
every day with you.
I don't blame you. So
But it has
thanks,
been fun.
everybody. And we'll be looking forward to seeing you next time. We're out.